You're going to try and attempt this question about elapsed time travel in travel and travel agency management. So there are a few tricks you need to know before attempting such a question. I'm going to share a few of those tricks right here, if you're able to follow. So what can we note? So the first thing you should note is that you need to know the time zones. Okay, you need to know the time zones. So we know the time zones by drawing the grid. So we can mark this grid. This is GMT. Then from here, going this side, there are 12 hours. And this one is known as the Eastern Hemisphere. And every time zone that is on this side is a positive time zone. Then we also mark this side. You also mark it, and it makes 12 hours. So this side is known as the Western Hemisphere, and every time zone that is on this side carries a negative sign. So you can simply add them there. So that is one thing to note among the time zones. So in this case, we divide our grid and we mark this GMT. So what things do we need to note here? So the first thing you should know that if a point, let's say, is this side, on the negative side, for example, in the question that we are going to be referring to, we have Havana at -4. Yes, so we have Havana in Cuba. Then we also have Amsterdam at +2 AMS. So what does this mean? That one point is on the positive time zone, the Eastern Hemisphere, and another one is on the negative time zone, the Western Hemisphere. So what does this mean? It means that Amsterdam is ahead of Havana, isn't it? So by knowing this, you automatically know that Amsterdam is ahead of Havana. Havana is behind Amsterdam. So we want to know how many hours is Amsterdam ahead of Havana, and how many hours is Havana behind Amsterdam. So we get the time zone for Amsterdam. So we're going to find the time zone difference. We get the time zone difference, which is Havana is -4 and Amsterdam is +2. So how do we get the time zone difference? what you have to keep in mind, note, if time zones are in different hemispheres, you add the time zones to get the time zone difference. So in this case, our time zones are on different hemispheres. One is at the eastern hemisphere, another one is at the negative hemisphere, meaning that we are going to add these hemispheres to know the number of hours Amsterdam is ahead of Havana, or the number of hours Amsterdam is behind. The number of times Havana is behind Amsterdam. So in this case, we add them. They've told us if they're on the same, if they're on different hemispheres, we add them, meaning that we're going to get 6 hours. So once you know this, you can easily tell the time at Havana. You can also easily tell the time in Amsterdam. So, giving a small example, if it's 10 p.m., in Amsterdam, what time is it in Havana? So we've already seen that to be able to tell this, we need to first find the time zone difference as step 1. Identify the time zones for each, and then tell this is on different sides, this one is also on a different side. So we have to add these time zones because one is on the negative, another one is on the positive. So the first trick is you add these time zones, you get 6 hours. So if it's 10 p.m. in Amsterdam, meaning that we shall go backwards to find what time is it in Havana when it's 10 p.m. in Amsterdam. So we shall go backwards. We say right here it's going to be 9 p.m. When we go back here, it's going to be 8 p.m. When we go back, it's going to be 7 p.m. When we go back, it's going to be 6 p.m. We go back, it's going to be 5 p.m. When we go back, it's going to be 4 p.m. So we've gone back 6 hours. After finding the time zone difference, we've gone back 6 hours. So meaning that it's going to be 4 p.m. in Havana when it's 10 p.m. in Amsterdam. So that's the first difference you can get. You can also get other examples of time zones being on different grids, but if one is on the eastern hemisphere and another one is on the western hemisphere, you must identify the time zones first, okay? Then after, you add them. Why? Because they're on different sides. But what if? Now we're going to look at another example. What if these time zones are on the same side? Either they are both on the western hemisphere or they are both on the eastern hemisphere. So in this second video, we are going to get an example of if time zones are on the same side. So in the question that we're going to be looking at, you have an example of Kigali and EBB. So Kigali, the time zone of Kigali is at +2. Kigali is KGL. Then the one for EBB is also at +3. Meaning that EBB is ahead of KGL since its time zone is at +3 from GMT and Rwanda is at +2 from GMT. So if you're asked the question that if it's let's use an example of if it's 8 a.m. in KGL, what time is it in EBB? So what did we say? This is the second note. The first thing you need to do is find the time zone. The first thing you need to do is find the time zone difference. So in this case, we have KGL. Here we had Havana and AMS. So in this case, we have KGL, and we also have EBB. So what are the time zones for these countries? KGL is at +2. EBB is at +3. So what we do in this case, the time zone difference, is that what you have to note here is, let us see what you're going to get. Note. If time zones are on the same side, if time zones are on the same side, i.e. eastern side or western side, that's the hemisphere, we subtract the time zones. So what does this mean? In this case, we have time zones on the same side. KGL and EBB are on the same side. So meaning that we are going to subtract these time zones. And remember, we do not consider these signs when we are subtracting or adding time zones. We do not consider positive and negative side. You understand? So this, remember, was negative, this one was positive. So you do not consider these signs when we are doing time zones. You just add it as it is or subtract it as it is. Alright? So we go to +2, KGL +3, EBB. That is, we subtract these time zones because they're on the same side. And in this case, these are on the eastern side. So what we get? We get 1 hour. And then now we go back to our question. The question is asking, what time is it in EBB when it is 8 a.m. in KGL? So what do we do in this case? Now, there is another thing that you should need to note. Note number 3. What are we supposed to note in this case? We are going to note that if you are finding what time is on a point that is ahead comma, we add the time zone difference. So in this case we have 1 hour, okay? But if the time we are finding is behind, we subtract the time zone difference. If you don't want to use the terms that I've used here, you can simply say that if you're finding what time it is on the point that is ahead, we move forward. Understand? We move forward on the grid. For example, we move forward from KGL to EBB. But if we are finding time that is behind, we move backwards. But here we've said you add, okay? So maybe you can simply put it in brackets and you say move forward. Then here, instead of subtracting, we can say move backwards. Okay, it's the same term. Okay, so now in this case, the time we are trying to find is ahead. Okay, we are trying to find the time at EBB when it's 8 a.m. in KGL. So the time zone difference that we get, the 1 hour, we add it or we move forward. Okay, so if we move forward to +3, we get what we get? We get 9 a.m. So in this case, what you have to note is that we moved forward because EBB is in front, or it's ahead of KGL by 1 hour. But if at all we were asked, so here the answer is what time? The question is, what time is it at EBB when it's 8 a.m. at KGL? So the answer is it's going to be 9 a.m. at EBB. But what if you are asked in the reverse way, that what time is it when it's 9 a.m. at EBB? What time is it in KGL? So meaning that since KGL will be behind in this case, we are going to move backwards, or we subtract the time zone difference, which is going to land us back at 8 a.m. Okay, so that's something else to note on the time zone differences.